Okay, today we are going to talk about some properties of multiplication and division. These properties are very similar to the properties of addition and subtraction that we talked about last chapter. So you should have in front of you a piece of paper that you have cut into pieces. If you have not done that yet, what you're going to do is you are going to take the paper. So it'll start out like this, normal paper, fold it in half, and then cut 5 flaps, okay? They're flaps because you're going to write on the inside. And then you need to make sure one says commutative property of multiplication. One says identity property of multiplication. Zero property of multiplication. Zeros in division. And ones in division. Go ahead and make sure you have that ready to go before you go any further, because we will be filling this out together. Okay, so the first property I want to talk about is the commutative property, and this one is just like the commutative property of addition. So the commutative property of multiplication states that when multiplying, the order of the factors, so the two numbers you're multiplying, does not change the product. So it does not matter what order you multiply the numbers in, the answer is still the same. So for example, 3 times 4 gives you 12, okay? And you're writing everything I'm writing. And 4 times 3 also gives you 12. That is what the commutative property says. It doesn't matter what order you multiply the numbers in. You are still going to get the same answer. Same thing as if you would have had 4 times 2 times 3. Wouldn't matter what order you multiplied them in, you'd still get the same answer. That's a little bit for the next lesson, but it doesn't matter if you do 2 times 3 times 4 or 4 times 3 times 2. You're still going to get the same answer because of that commutative property. Okay? The next property is the identity property of multiplication. So just like with the identity property of addition, this is showing that when you take a number and you multiply it by 1, the product is that number. So if I've got 7 times 1, it's going to equal 7. So any number times 1 is going to be that number. That's going to be the answer. So that is what the identity property of multiplication states. The next one is the zero property of multiplication. And this property states that whenever a number is multiplied by 0, the answer will forever and always be 0. It doesn't matter if you have 4 times 8 times 5 times 0. If there's a multiplied by 0 in there, the answer is 0. Okay? 0 is the answer. So that is what the zero property of multiplication tells us. The next one is zeros in division. So this says that when you divide 0 by any non-zero number, the quotient is 0. So if I take 0 and I divide it into 9 parts, I'm still going to have 0. Okay? Still going to have 0. The zeros in division property also says that it's impossible to divide a number by 0. So it's saying that we cannot do 9 divided by 0. That will give you a big old error, okay? We can't take 9 somethings and divide it by 0. That's impossible. You can't take 9 markers and put them into 0 piles. It's impossible. They'll always be in one pile. However, we can take 0 sticky notes and put them into 9 piles. Just make 9 invisible piles. You can do that, but you cannot divide something by 0. That is our zeros in division property. The last one I want to talk about is ones in division. And this says that when you divide any number by 1, the quotient is always the dividend. Meaning, if you take a number and you divide it by 1, you're going to get that number. So if you take 8 and divide it into one group, you're going to have 8 in that one group. See? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I put all my 8 in one group. Okay? It also tells you that when you divide any non-zero number, so just any number that's not 0 by itself, the answer is always going to be 1. So 6 divided by 6 gives me 1. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to divide 6 into 6 groups. There's 1 in each group. So if you have 8 and you divide it by 1, you're always going to get 8. Doesn't matter if you do 727 divided by 1, you're going to have 727. You're going to do 6 and you're going to divide it into 6 groups. Dividing that number by itself, you're going to have 1 as your answer. So these are just some basic things that you know already about multiplication and division. We are just now putting names to these properties. Okay, so let's do some examples really quick. So I want you to go ahead and think about what property each of these are. We're going to start with this pink one here. Use your foldable if you need it. So 12 times 0 gives me 0. What property do we think this might be? This one is the 0 property of multiplication because we are taking a number and multiplying it by 0 and we get 0. So this one is the 0 property of multiplication. Looking now at this orange one, which property is this one? Well, we know it has to be a division property because there's a division sign there, and it has to do with ones. Well, and I'm dividing 9 by 1, and I'm getting 9, so it is ones in division. Okay, 8 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 8. What property is that? That is the commutative property because this property tells us that it doesn't matter what order we multiply numbers in, we are still going to have the same answer. So that is the commutative property of multiplication. And the last one, this purple one right here. 33 times 1 gives me 33. Identity property, because 33 times 1 is still going to be itself. It keeps its identity. So this is the identity property of multiplication.